Hello everyone. Did you know that almost 80% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed yet? If you've been enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow more than you know. Also, don't forget to drop a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback not only supports me, but also helps these stories reach more people. And one more thing, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Let me know down below. Music. My name is Deputy Jake Morrison, and I've been carrying this burden for 4 long years. 4 years of restless nights, checking my doors twice before bed, jumping at every flicker of shadow where nothing should be. I've never shared what truly happened out there in Archer County. Not with anyone. Not even with my wife Linda, before she walked out on me. Maybe, especially not Linda. There are things too heavy to speak aloud. Things that barely make sense in your own mind, let alone to someone else. It began in September of 2019. I was working the graveyard shift, same as I had for most of my 15 years on the force. I liked those late hours. Fewer people, fewer forms to file. Just me and endless stretches of Texas highway rolling out under a sky so wide it made you feel like a speck of dust. That particular night, I was patrolling the north end of County Road 2847, the section that cuts past the old Piton Ranch before stretching out toward me. Hardly anyone knew about that road unless they had business with the oil pumps or they were dumping something they didn't want discovered. The call came through at exactly 11:47 p.m. I remember the time clear as day because I had just glanced at my watch, counting the hours left before I could head back to my empty house. Linda had been gone for 3 weeks by then, staying with her sister. Said she needed space to think. 23 years of marriage, and suddenly she needed more room. The irony wasn't lost on Mimi, the man who spent his nights driving through miles of emptiness, through landscapes so big and barren they could swallow a manhole and still. My wife said she needed more space. Unit 14, we've got a report of suspicious activity out near the old Piton place. Sarah's voice came crackling over the radio. Sarah had been dispatched for about 8 years. I knew her tone of voice well, and that night, it carried something different. Something that said she wasn't sure what this was, but whatever it was, it didn't sit right with her. Copy that. Dispatch. What kind of activity are we talking about? Caller says they've been seeing lights moving around the property. Been watching for about an hour. No vehicles in sight, but the lights keep going from building to building. I eased my cruiser onto the shoulder, pulled out my notepad, and scribbled down a few details. The Piton Ranch had been deserted for at least 5 years ever since old Joe Piton suffered a stroke and moved in with his daughter in Dallas. The place covered about 200 acres of scrubland, littered with mesquite trees and a handful of oil pumps still grinding away. The main house was a sagging 2-story farmhouse that had clearly seen better days. A couple of barns and sheds dotted the property, along with an old bunkhouse the ranch hands used back when the place was still alive with work. Any description of the lights? I asked. Caller said they looked like flashlights. Maybe lanterns. Moving slow, like someone searching for something. I jotted it down, then dropped the car back into drive. 10 to 4, en route, ATA, about 15 minutes. Copy. Unit 14. Be advised, we tried reaching the property owner, but no answer. Daughter in Dallas says no one should be there. That was nothing new. Mary, Joe's daughter, had been trying to unload the place for years, but nobody wanted it. Too much work needed on the house, and the land was only good for grazing cattle if you had 3 times the acreage. Every now and then, I'd swing by the property myself, just to make sure it hadn't been claimed by local teenagers throwing parties or some tweakers looking for a hideout. The place had been quiet for months. The road out to the Piton Ranch cuts through some of the loneliest country in all of Texas. County Road 2847 is just a thin ribbon of cracked black top. weeds sprouting up through jagged splits in the pavement. On either side, the land stretches flat and endless, only interrupted by the occasional oil pump nodding slowly up and down like some giant metal bird, forever pecking at the dirt. By day, you could see for miles in every direction. At night, though, the darkness swallowed everything, leaving only the narrow tunnel of light carved by your headlights. I knew that road better than most people know their own driveways. Every bend, every dip, every landmark etched into memory after so many years. 3 miles out from the Piton place, there's an old windmill. Nothing but a skeleton now, most of its blades gone. 2 miles past that, a cattle guard lies in wait, rattling your bones if you hit it too quick. And just before you reach the ranch itself, there's a sharp left curve, where the pavement follows an old creek bed that hasn't seen water in decades. As I rounded that bend, the farmhouse came into view. It sat about a quarter-mile back from the road, reached by a rutted dirt drive that had more holes than surface. The house was dark, same as always, but there was movement. Light. Just like the caller said. A beam flickered and shifted behind the house, near the barn. A flashlight. Or maybe a lantern. I rolled up to the gate at the end of the drive and cut the engine. The gate was chained shut, like always. But this time, the chain was hanging loose. Freshly cut. Someone had taken bolt cutters to it, not a speck of rust on the exposed metal. I keyed my radio, reporting my position and the condition of the gate, then pushed it open and steered down the driveway. The dirt track was overgrown and uneven, my cruiser lurching and bouncing as I crawled forward. I kept my headlights on, but low, trying not to announce myself too soon. As I closed in on the house, I got a better look. The light wasn't random, it was moving deliberately, sweeping back and forth across the ground behind the barn, methodical, like a search pattern. I parked about 50 yards out, angled the cruiser so I'd have a quick way out if I needed it. Before stepping out, I checked my sidearm, tested my radio, and unclipped the flashlight from its charger. The night was still eerily still. The only sounds were the Texas countryside doing what it always did. Crickets singing, an oil pump groaning somewhere far off, and the dry wind whispering through tall grass. And ahead of me, a light moving back and forth, searching for something I didn't yet understand. As I made my way toward the house, another sound reached me. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't an animal. It was the sharp, rhythmic scrape of metal against soil. Someone was digging. The noise came from behind the barn, the same place I'd noticed the faint light earlier. Staying low and hugging the shadows, I edged closer, intent on getting a clearer view. The barn stood about 100 yards behind the main house, a weather-beaten structure that had clearly lived through better years. Half its roof was missing. The planks faded to a dull gray, warped with time and neglect. Yet, even in that state of ruin, I could see someone had been working on it recently. Fresh boards covered gaps in the siding, and the weeds around the perimeter had been cleared away, leaving bare ground. Whoever had been here cared enough to put in the effort. Asterisk, circling quietly around the side of the barn, I finally saw the source of the light. A man stood behind the building, bent over a patch of dirt, steadily shoveling under the glow of a battery-powered lantern. He was tall and wiry, dressed in dark clothes, with a baseball cap pulled low to shadow his face. His movements were deliberate, methodical, not the frantic digging of someone in a hurry, but the steady labor of a man who knew exactly where and what he was after. I lingered there for several minutes, debating how to handle the situation. He didn't seem immediately dangerous, just a man with a shovel. But there was something about the scene that refused to sit right with me. The patched-up barn, the organized work, the fact that the chain across the property had been cut. None of it pointed to anything innocent. Finally, I decided to reveal myself. Backing toward the front of the barn, I raised my voice. "Sheriff's Department. Step away from the shovel and show me your hands." The man froze instantly, straightening slowly. He didn't turn to face me, nor did he drop the shovel. He stood completely still, like an animal that's caught the scent of a predator but isn't sure which way to bolt. "Step away from the shovel and show me your hands," I repeated, flashlight locked on him as I edged closer. That was when he turned, and I caught my first real look at his face. He was older than I'd imagined, easily in his 60s, hair graying, deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. But what unsettled me most was his expression. He wasn't shocked or even annoyed. He looked relieved. "Evening, deputy," he said in a calm, steady voice. "I figured you'd come. Been expecting you." That was the first thing that sent alarms ringing in my head. "Expecting me? Not you personally," he clarified, as if he'd read my mind. "But I knew someone would show up eventually. Folks in this county don't tend to mind their own business for long." He was still gripping the shovel, and the lantern revealed the evidence of his work. A hole already 3 feet deep, maybe 4 across. The dirt was piled neatly to the side, the layers of soil different shades, dark, rich topsoil on top, lighter sandy soil beneath, the kind of striations you only get when ground has been disturbed before. "Set the shovel down and step back," I ordered, keeping my tone firm. "But even this is private property, and you're trespassing." "I know who owns this land," he said quietly. Then, almost casually, he let the shovel fall and took a slow step back. "I used to work here, back when Joe Paton was still running cattle. That'd be what, 15 years ago now?" That caught my attention. Joe had hired plenty of ranch hands over the years, and I certainly didn't know every one of them. It wasn't impossible this man was telling the truth. But his story still didn't explain what he was doing out here in the dead of night, digging holes. "What's your name?" I asked. "Tom Brennan," he replied without hesitation. "Worked for Joe from '98 through 2004. Lived in the bunkhouse yonder." He gestured toward a squat building I could just barely make out in the dark. "And what exactly are you doing out here tonight, Tom?" He hesitated, silent long enough that I could see him struggling with whether to answer. Finally, he spoke. "I buried something here a long time ago. I came back to dig it up." "What kind of something?" Another pause, longer this time. "Money," he admitted. "About 50 grand. That amount of cash wasn't what you'd expect from a ranch hand." My unease deepened. "And why would you bury that kind of money out here?" His eyes flicked toward the hole, then back at me. "It's complicated. I've got time." For a long moment, he studied me, as though deciding whether to gamble on honesty. Then he sighed. "I stole it. From Joe. Back in 2004. It was cattle sale money. I was supposed to take it to the bank, but I never did. I planned to run, start fresh somewhere else. But I lost my nerve. Knew if I vanished with that much cash, everyone would know who to blame. So, I buried it here, figuring I'd come back when things cooled off. And you never came back." I tried. A few months later, I drove out, but Joe had new hands staying in the bunkhouse. Then his wife fell sick, so folks were always around. After his stroke, his daughter was out here all the time dealing with lawyers and property stuff. I never got another chance to come alone. The story was believable enough on the surface. Still, something gnawed at me. Why now? Why choose tonight, after all these years? His answer was blunt, almost casual. "Because I'm dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Before I go, I want to set things right. Give the money back to Joe's daughter." In the glare of my flashlight, I studied him. He looked exhausted, worn down by age and illness, with a weight in his eyes that could have been honesty. But I'd been in law enforcement long enough to know that the best lies often wore the clothes of truth. "You mind if I take a look in that hole?" I asked. "Be my guest." Keeping the beam trained on him, I stepped over to the edge of the pit. It was deeper than I'd realized, close to 4 feet down. But what really caught my attention wasn't the depth, it was the soil itself. It looked freshly turned, disturbed more than once, like someone had dug and refilled this exact spot before. And then I saw it. A scrap of fabric at the bottom, blue denim, like from a pair of jeans. But it wasn't just fabric. It was wrapped around something thick, rigid, and unmistakably shaped like a human leg. My blood ran cold. I staggered back, one hand instinctively moving to my weapon. "Tom, get down on the ground, now." He noticed the change in my stance instantly, and his whole demeanor shifted. The relief, the gratitude, gone. In its place, a harder, colder expression settled in. "You found it, didn't you?" he said, almost casually. "On the ground, hands behind your head," I barked, drawing my weapon fully. "I told you I buried something here," he replied. His tone was low, almost mocking. "Just didn't tell you what. Down now." Instead of complying, Tom Brennan smiled, a hollow, joyless smile that never touched his eyes. "You know, deputy," he said softly, "I've been watching you for a while. You drive past here every few weeks, always at night, always alone. Very predictable." The words stopped me cold. "You're predictable," I said evenly. "Same route, same time, same routine, makes it real easy to plan around." My pulse was hammering. This wasn't about stolen cash anymore, or even about whatever was hidden in that pit. This was about me. Plan for what? For enough time to finish my business without being disturbed. But then it hit me, why not take care of both problems at once? I started edging back, weapon still aimed at him, but putting space between us. "What? Problems?" "The problem of what I buried here," I said, "and the problem of the cop who stumbled onto it." That's when I heard the steady crunch of boots behind me. Someone else had been waiting, listening, the whole time Tom and I were talking. I spun around fast, but I was too late. A crushing blow slammed into the back of my skull, and I hit the ground hard. The world went black. When I came to, I was lying in the dirt beside the open hole. My head throbbed, blood dripping warm down my neck. My gun was gone. My wrists were zip-tied tight behind me. Tom Brennan stood over me, shovel in hand, face cold as stone. Beside him was a younger man, maybe early 30s, wearing camo pants and a dark jacket. He held my service pistol with casual familiarity. "Welcome back, deputy," Tom said with a grim smile. "We were just getting started." I forced myself upright, though my head spun. "What do you want?" "Well, at first, I just wanted to dig up what I buried and walk away," Tom said. "But now you've seen too much." My eyes flicked to the hole. More shapes were visible now, wrapped in denim and plastic sheeting. Not one body, 3, maybe more. They'd been down there long enough for fabric to rot and edges to fray. "Who are they?" I asked. Tom's expression didn't change. People who got in my way. People who asked the wrong questions. People who shouldn't have been here. The younger man finally spoke, voice sharp. "Pop, we need to finish this. Sun's gonna be up soon." "Pop?" So they were father and son. "You're right, Bobby," Tom said. "Deputy Morrison here is going to be added to our little collection. But first, I need to know something." He fixed me with those cold, lifeless eyes. "How many people know you came out here tonight?" I considered lying, but figured my best shot was bluffing back up. "Dispatch has my location. They'll check on me soon," Bobby sneered. "No, they won't. We've been monitoring your radio. Nobody's checked in for over an hour." It was true. On quiet nights, hours could pass without a word. Tonight had been one of those nights until now. "Here's how it's going to go," Tom said. "We're making this look like an accident. You fell in the hole, cracked your skull on a rock. Tragic loss in the line of duty. You'll get a hero's funeral, and no one will ever know what really happened. Except you'll know," I shot back. "And you'll know that one day, someone's going to find all this. Asterisk, asterisk maybe," Tom shrugged. "But by then, Bobby and I will be long gone. We've thought it through. I was stalling, hoping backup might miraculously appear, but I knew Sarah wouldn't think to check my status for another hour, maybe 2. By then, I'd be in that hole. Why? I asked. Why kill all these people? Tom hesitated, weighing how much truth to spill. Finally, he said, the first was an accident. A hiker, young woman. She saw something she shouldn't have. The rest, one thing led to another. Gets easier after the first. What did she see? She saw Bobby here hiding evidence from a job in Oklahoma. Bobby's got a knack for making people disappear, but sometimes he leaves loose ends. Bobby grinned, showing gaps where teeth had once been. I'm getting better. How many? I asked quietly. Counting you. Tom tilted his head. 8, maybe 9. I lose track. The scale of it hit me. This wasn't about a graveyard. This was a slaughter ground, used for years. A father and son killing team. You picked the wrong land, I said. This property's going up for sale. New owners will clear it. They'll find everything. Maybe, Tom said, but not our concern anymore. Tonight's our last job. We're retiring. He nodded to Bobby. Bobby circled behind me. I felt the press of my own gun against the back of my head. Any last words, deputy? I closed my eyes. Thoughts of Linda filled my mind. The children we'd never had. The life I'd built and lost. The people I'd helped. The good I'd tried to do. And the souls already buried in this dirt, who'd died just like I was, about 2. Yeah, I said finally. I've got something to say. What's that? I've been recording this whole conversation. Silence. Then Tom chuckled. Nice bluff. We checked. You've got no recorder. Not on me, I said, in my cruiser, dash cam. Audio feeds straight to the station. They've heard everything. It was a lie. We didn't have the funding for dash cams, but they didn't know that. I watched Tom's face tighten. Bobby, check his car. Pop, he's lying. He's stalling. Maybe. But check. Reluctantly, Bobby handed the gun back to his father and jogged toward my cruiser. Tom kept me covered, but doubt clouded his eyes. You're bluffing, am I? I asked. You want to risk it? The air thickened with silence. We both listened as Bobby tore through my car. Minutes later, he came back, scowling. Nothing, Pop. No camera, no mic. He's full of it. Tom's jaw hardened. Thought so. Clever, deputy. But it's over. He raised the gun. My chest clenched. I shut my eyes and braced for the end. But instead of a shot, I heard engines. Multiple vehicles. Fast. Tom and Bobby froze. What the hell? Bobby hissed. Headlights cut through the brush. Beams bouncing. 3, maybe 4 vehicles. All coming in from different angles. Sirens. Flashing bars of red and blue. Sheriff's Department, I muttered, stunned. Or maybe state police. Or a booming voice cut through the night. Drop your weapons. Hands in the air. Texas Rangers. Tom and Bobby stared at each other, panic flashing. They were boxed in, nowhere to run. This can't be, Tom whispered. No one knew. Drop your weapons now. Final warning. Bobby's hands started to rise, trembling. Pop, we need to give it up? They've got us. Bobby's voice cracked with fear, but Tom wasn't ready to let go. His grip on the pistol stayed tight, barrel aimed straight at my chest, finger trembling on the trigger. If I'm going down, you're going down with me, he growled through clenched teeth, and then the night exploded into blinding white. Spotlights bright as noon flooded the clearing, stealing away every shadow. I couldn't see a thing past the glare, but I could hear them. Heavy boots crunching gravel. The unmistakable shuffle of multiple officers closing in. Put the gun down, a voice barked. Drop it. Drop it now. Tom's hand shook harder. I could see the battle in his eyes. Shoot me and seal his fate, or throw in the towel. He never got to choose. The crack of a rifle split the night. A sniper's bullet slammed into his shoulder, spinning him sideways, the gun flying into the dirt. Bobby dropped instantly, face down, arms stretched behind him, surrender written in every motion. Tom writhed in agony, clutching the wound, cursing through clenched teeth. And me, I was still breathing. Somehow, I was still alive. It took a long moment before my mind caught up to what had just happened. The scene around me was a blur of movements, deputies, state police, and 2 Texas Rangers pouring in. Someone cut the zip ties from my wrists, checked me over for injuries, while others secured the Brennans and called in the medical examiner. But the question ate at me almost immediately. How did they know? I hadn't called for backup. Dispatch hadn't sent anyone. So who brought them here? That's when Sergeant Martinez from the state police approached. "You holding up, deputy?" he asked. "Yeah, I think so. But how? How'd you even know to come out here?" "Got a call around 1:30, he said. Anonymous tip. Caller said an officer was in trouble at the old Pettin place, said shots had been fired." My stomach twisted. Anonymous tip from who? He shook his head. "Can't say." Voice was disguised, muffled. Could have been a man, could have been a woman. But they knew things, distal stuff only somebody standing right here would have known. I looked across the property, scanning every corner, every dark patch beyond the floodlights. Tom and Bobby were accounted for. Nobody else had been here, at least, no one I could see. "The caller said there were bodies buried behind the barn," Martinez continued. "That's why we rolled so heavy. Thought we might have a serial on our hands. Turns out, he let the sentence hang. He didn't need to finish." Hours later, crime scene techs unearthed 9 shallow graves in the dirt behind the barn. 9 lives, stolen by Tom and Bobby Brennan. The investigation would eventually tie them to disappearances in 3 different states, nearly 20 years of evil. But one piece never fit the call. Phone records showed it came from a burner, bought with cash, never used again. Location data placed it somewhere near the ranch. The phone itself was never recovered. The caller never identified. 2 days later, Tom Brennan died in the hospital from complications. Bobby was sentenced to life without parole, and he never spoke a word about that call. Claimed he didn't know a thing. The official report listed it as an anonymous Good Samaritan, some concerned witness who happened to see the crime unfold. But that explanation never sat right with me. There was nobody else out there, nobody who could have watched, unless someone had been there all along, watching, waiting, and, when the moment was right, they stepped and saved my life only to vanish back into the night. I've replayed that night every single day for the past 4 years. Every sound, every glance, every heartbeat leading up to backup's arrival, and I always circle back to the same riddle. Who made that call? The answer, I've come to believe, is tangled with something else. Something I've never told anyone, not even in my official report. Something that made an already strange story feel like a nightmare. After Tom and Bobby were taken away, after the bodies were exhumed, after the medical examiner hauled away the dead, I went back to my cruiser to write up my statement. That's when I saw it, tucked under the windshield wiper, a single piece of lined notebook paper, ripped at the edges. Bold block letters, written by hand. "You're welcome, Deputy Morrison. Be more careful next time." I still have that note. Taste locked in a safe in my bedroom. On nights when sleep won't come, I take it out and stare at those words, tracing every letter. Wondering who left it tanned, why. I never saw another soul on that property. The investigation turned up 0 evidence of a third party. But someone was there. Someone who knew me by name. Someone who stayed invisible until it mattered most. That's when the real nightmare began. A week later, the dreams started. I'd find myself back in that shallow pit, surrounded by bodies. Tom Brennan's pistol pointed at my head. But in the dreams, There was always a third figure, someone lurking just outside the edge of the light, watching, never speaking. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart racing, and the first thing I'd do was check the locks. Every door, every window. Then I'd stand at the curtain, staring out into the quiet street, half expecting to see someone waiting there in the shadows. Linda came back once the story hit the news. She said she was proud of me for stopping killers. But I saw the fear. Behind her smile, she could tell something deeper was wrong. She urged me to talk to someone, to take time off, to process the trauma. But how do you explain that? What haunted me wasn't just the violence, wasn't just coming face to face with death, but the presence of something else. Someone who knew me, who saved me, who kept watching. The marriage didn't last. Linda said I'd grown cold, paranoid. Said I flinched at every creak in the house, checked the locks obsessively, never slept. She wasn't wrong, but she never knew the truth. I was certain someone had eyes on me. At first it was subtle. A trash can slightly shifted. My mail stacked in a different order than I'd left it. Nothing you could prove, but enough to plant doubt. Enough to make you question if you were ever really alone. Then the phone calls started. Always late, always. In the dead hours too, sometimes 3 in the morning. I'd answer, and there'd be nothing but silence. Not the hang-up of a wrong number, not the dead air of a telemarketer, but silence thick with intent. The kind of silence that says, I'm here, I'm listening. I had the calls traced. Different numbers every time, untraceable. Burners, just like the one that made the tip. I began to connect the dots. The anonymous voice that saved me. The watcher in the dark. The late night calls. Maybe they were all the same person. Maybe my savior never left. But why me? I tore myself apart trying to find the answer. I returned to the Piton Ranch again and again, combing every inch for a sign. Questioned ranch hands, oil workers, hunters, hikers. Nobody knew anything. Nobody had seen or heard a thing. It was as if my mysterious guardian had stepped out of the ether, saved me, and dissolved back into nothingness. The not knowing was eating me alive. Mistakes crept into my work. Reports left sloppy. Shifts missed. Sheriff Roberts finally called me in, suggested I take a break, get some help. He wasn't wrong. I was unraveling, but I knew rest wouldn't fix this. The questions would still be there when I came back. Asterisk, asterisk. So I decided I'd force the truth into the open. I began shifting my patrol patterns, switching up my routes, doing everything I could to throw off anyone who might be tracking me. I left. Little tells behind stones arranged in a certain way, twigs broken in patterned tiny markers that would betray if someone came through after me. Weeks passed, nothing disturbed. I started thinking maybe I was losing my mind, letting paranoia consume me. And then, on a bitter December night, I finally got my answer. I'd stopped at an old church graveyard, 10 miles outside town, a forgotten plot of land, where time had erased the names of those buried there a century ago. And that's where I found what I'd been waiting for. I'd sat parked there for nearly 20 minutes, jotting notes in my logbook and idly scrolling through my phone. Before pulling away, I placed a small stone atop a particular gravestone, angled it just so, in a way only I would recognize. A marker, my way of knowing if anyone had tampered with the site. When I returned the following night, the stone was gone, but in its place was something worse. A note, written in the same stiff block letters as the one before. Stop looking for me, Deputy Morrison. You won't like what you find. The message froze me to the core. Someone had been there. Someone had seen my marker, moved it, and left me an answer. Someone who knew I was on their trail. My hands trembled as I picked up the paper, careful not to smudge potential prints. It was evidence, undeniable proof, that this wasn't paranoia or some trick of my imagination. I was being watched. Someone out there, maybe the same presence I'd felt that night at the Piton property, had been shadowing me ever since. The message was clear. Back off. I should have taken the warning and closed the book on it right then, but I couldn't. Whoever this was, they weren't just trespassing or playing games. They knew too much about me. I needed to know who and why. So I kept setting little traps, altered my routes, varied my routine, waiting, watching, and eventually, I caught them. It happened on a Friday night in January. About 3 months after Peton, I was working the late shift, patrolling the northern stretch of the county. I'd just wrapped up a false alarm, reported break-in, nothing to it, and was heading back toward town when I noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first I didn't think much of it. Public road. Anyone could be out driving. But after a few miles, the car behind me kept its distance. Not too close, not too far, just enough to shadow me. Every turn I made, every adjustment in speed, it followed with precision. Someone was tailing me. My pulse kicked up, adrenaline flooding through me like it always did when danger drew near. I reached for the radio, then stopped halfway. What was I going to say? That I thought I was being followed? That I suspected it tied back to Peton? It would sound paranoid. Maybe I was paranoid, but I also knew I wasn't wrong. Instead of calling it in, I decided to flip the script. I pulled off onto the shoulder, idling to see what the car would do. The vehicle slowed but didn't stop. As it rolled beneath a streetlight, I got my first real look. Dark sedan, Honda or Toyota, couldn't tell. Tinted windows, license plate so caked in mud or grime it was unreadable. It cruised past and vanished around a bend. I waited a few minutes, then eased back onto the road. For a while, it seemed like maybe that was the end of it. But about an hour later, there it was again. This time the sedan was parked on the shoulder a quarter mile ahead. Engine humming, headlights off. As I drew closer, it pulled out onto the road in front of me, maintaining just enough distance to keep the game going. It wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone was tracking me, and they knew what they were doing. I had two options: call for backup, or tail them and see where it led. I chose the latter. For the next hour, we played a dangerous cat-and-mouse game across the back roads of Archer County. The other driver was skilled, almost professional. They knew how to shadow without being obvious, how to use curves, traffic, and terrain. But I'd been in the job 2 decades, and before that, the military had taught me a trick or two of my own. I doubled back on a parallel route, cut my lights, used my night vision to navigate, and eventually, I found them. The sedan was tucked behind an abandoned gas station 5 miles from the Peton place. The building had been shuttered for years, but the ground told a different story. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt, faint light glowing through a side window where the boards had been pried away. I parked the cruiser 100 yards out, concealed by a cluster of mesquite, and approached on foot. The night was sharp and cold, moon bright enough to guide me once my eyes adjusted. The old station was a low concrete block structure with a flat roof, windows boarded over except for one. That's where the glow leaked out. I crept around to the side, crouching beneath the dirty, cracked glass. Inside, the service bay had been transformed into some kind of command post. Folding tables sagged under papers, photographs, electronic gear. Several monitors displayed surveillance feeds, though I couldn't make out the locations. At one table sat a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s maybe, short brown hair, dressed in military-style fatigues. The way she moved, precise, deliberate, screamed training. But what froze me was the spread of photographs laid out in front of her. All of them were of me, shots of me in my patrol car, at the grocery store, at my home, some clearly taken with a long lens from a distance, others closer, disturbingly close, like she'd been at arm's length. The collection stretched back months, maybe longer. My blood turned to ice. This was her, the watcher, the note leaver, the one who'd been shadowing my every move. But why? And how was she connected to the Brennans and that night at Pedden's? I shifted for a better angle, and that's when it happened. My boot crunched down on glass. Just a small crack, but in the stillness of the night, it sounded like thunder. Her head shot up, eyes locked straight to where I stood. Even through the grime of the window, I could see recognition flicker. Then came the smile, cold, sharp, calculated. She rose from her chair and crossed to the window. Her voice carried through the glass, like it was nothing. "Hello, Deputy Morrison. I've been waiting for you." I yanked my weapon free and angled for a clearer view. "Sheriff's Department. Step outside with your hands where I can see them." Her laugh was quiet, confident. "I don't think so. Why don't you come in instead? We've got plenty to discuss. Out now, or I call backup." She smirked. "Go ahead, but you'll want to hear me first. It's about the Piton property, about who really made that anonymous call." Her words froze me. "What do you know about that?" "Everything. I know because I was there. Because I'm the one who saved your life." My head spun. This woman, this stalker, was claiming she'd been the anonymous voice that brought help that night. Why save me then only to haunt me now? "Why?" I demanded through the glass. "Why were you there? Why help me?" Her tone was matter-of-fact. "Because killing you wasn't in the plan. Not then. Tom and Bobby Brennan were supposed to take you out, but not like that. Not yet." The word slammed into me like a punch. Not yet. She was talking about my death like it was penciled into a calendar. What plan? What the hell are you talking about? "Come inside, Deputy. Let me show you." Every instinct screamed to retreat, to radio for backup, to put distance between myself and this place. But I needed answers. Answers about her, the Brennans, about why she'd been watching me all this time, against my better judgment. I slid my weapon back into its holster and circled to the front. The door stood ajar, propped with a cinder block. Inside, the abandoned station had been remade into a full-blown surveillance hub. Computers, cameras, high-end, comms gear, military maps, photos, and timelines plastered across the walls, and at the center of it all, a whiteboard dedicated entirely to me. My patrol routes, daily habits, personal details, even notes about my failed marriage to Linda, my life dissected and cataloged, like I was just another case file. "Impressive, isn't it?" she said from behind a table, hands visible but not far from a pistol resting nearby. "I've been studying you nearly 2 years now." "Who are you?" I demanded. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a federal agent, though not from any agency you'd recognize. I work for a division that doesn't officially exist." She produced a badge and ID from her jacket, laying it carefully on the table. From where I stood, it looked legitimate, but the agency's name was blacked out, nothing but heavy redaction. What kind of federal agent stalks small-town deputies? The kind working a conspiracy 20 years deep. Dozens of murders. Across multiple states. She gestured to the board. The Brennan brothers weren't lone killers, Morrison. They were part of a network that's thrived in this part of Texas for decades. My throat was dry. What kind of network? Human trafficking, murder for hire, silencing witnesses. The Brennans were just foot soldiers, replaceable. I stared at the evidence sprawled before me, trying to digest it. And me, where do I fit? "You're not part of it." She picked up a folder and slid it across the table. "You're a target." Inside were photographs, documents, mugshots of lawmen from rural Texas counties, men and women who'd worn the badge, every one of them dead. 15 officers in the past 5 years, Chen went on, her tone flat, matter-of-fact, of them dead in what looked like random accidents or isolated crimes. But when you connect the dots, the truth is impossible to ignore. I flipped through the photos she'd laid out. Some of the faces I recognized. Their deaths had been written up in law enforcement bulletins. A deputy gunned down during what should have been a routine traffic stop. A sheriff killed in what was ruled a hunting mishap. A state trooper dead in a single-car accident on a straight, empty highway. What's the thread? I asked. We're all getting too close, Chen replied. Every single one of them uncovered pieces of the network's operations. And every single one of them was silenced before they could share what they'd found. And you think I'm next? I don't just think. I know. The Peton property wasn't coincidence, deputy. You were led there. Asterisk asterisk, the folder slipped from my grip, photographs scattering across the floor. Led there? What do you mean? The anonymous tip you responded to didn't come from a concerned neighbor. It came from inside the network. They knew Tom and Bobby were there, and they knew you'd answer the call. But why? If they wanted me dead, why not just kill me outright? Why drag the Brennans into it? Because it needed to look clean, Chen said. Random. If too many officers die under suspicious circumstances, questions get asked. But if you died at the hands of a known killer during a standard investigation, that looks like misfortune. I thought back to that night. The call Sarah relayed had been from an anonymous source reporting suspicious activity. Who had called? And how could they have known the Brennans would be on that land at that exact time? The problem, Chen said, is that Tom Brennan didn't stick to the script. He was supposed to dispatch you quickly and quietly. Instead, he talked. He explained. He stalled. That gave me just enough time to call in the cavalry. I froze. You were watching. I've been watching you for 2 years, Morrison. I knew this day was coming. I just didn't know when. The weight of it hit me like a hammer. A hidden conspiracy spanning decades, law enforcement deaths, a network of killers working under our noses. And somehow I was tangled in the middle of it. Why me? What did I do to make their list? Chen pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. 3 years ago, you responded to a missing persons case. Maria Santos. Ring a bell. I remembered instantly. Maria Santos, 22, student from Austin. She'd gone camping with friends, vanished during a solo hike. We'd scoured the forest for weeks. No sign. We'd chalked it up to an animal attack or a fall into terrain we couldn't reach. She was murdered by the same people behind the Brennan killings, Chen said, sliding a map toward me. Red lines traced my search routes, overlapped by a black X. This marks where she was really buried. My stomach turned. I'd been within 50 yards. Just 50. If I'd widened the grid even a little, I would have found her. And maybe the trail that would have blown the whole thing open. But you didn't, Chen said. They didn't know that though. All they knew was that a local deputy came too close. So they put you on the list. A list. A roster of cops to be eliminated. You've been living on borrowed time for 3 years. I dropped heavily into a chair, the room spinning. My life, my career, the sense of safety I thought I had all been a lie. I'd been walking with a bullseye on my back, oblivious. Why didn't you warn me? Why keep me in the dark? Because you had to behave normally, Chen said. If you knew you were marked, you'd change your patterns, and that would make tracking the network harder. So you used me as bait. I kept you alive, she countered. Do you really think it's coincidence? None of their previous attempts worked. Her words froze me. Previous attempts? She slid yet another folder across the table. 8 months ago, your patrol car's brakes failed. That wasn't wear and tear. They cut your brake lines. I remembered the incident vividly. Barreling. Downhill. No brakes. Swerving into a ditch to stop. I'd shrugged it off as bad luck. Last Christmas, Chen went on. You ordered the fish special at Romano's. 12 customers ate it. Only you ended up hospitalized. That wasn't food poisoning. It was deliberate. I felt my skin crawl. I'd spent 3 days in the hospital, unable to keep food or water. Down. Doctors never figured it out. They wanted it to look like a heart attack or a stroke, but you got treatment too quickly. How many times? My voice was low. 5 in the last year and a half. Every attempt masked as accident or illness. Every one intercepted because I was watching. I stared at the mountain of files, proof of a vast conspiracy, bigger than anything I could have imagined. A shadow network that had decided I needed to be erased. What do they want now? Why keep coming? Because you're the last person who can tie them to Maria Santos. And because you survived the Piton property. That made them nervous. And nervous people screw up. What kind of screw-ups? They'll get desperate. They won't use proxies anymore. They'll come themselves. The chill that ran through me was bone deep. When? I don't know when, but I know how. They're going to stage it as suicide. Suicide. Think about it. Veteran deputy. Haunted by the Piton incident. Marriage collapsed. Drinking problem. It writes itself. Everyone will say they saw it coming. I swallowed hard. She wasn't wrong. Since that night, I hadn't been the same. Linda was gone. I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking too much. To anyone looking from the outside, I looked like a man circling the drain. They've been setting the stage for months, Chen continued, planting seeds, making sure colleagues notice your mood swings, documenting your mistakes. So when it happens, the story fits. What kind of evidence? I asked quietly. Prescription bottles for antidepressants sat in my medicine cabinet. Prescriptions I'd never ordered. Searches for suicide methods appeared in my browser history. Searches I had never typed. Records of late-night phone calls to crisis hotlines existed under my name. Calls I had never made. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My house, my sanctuary, had been invaded in ways I couldn't have imagined. These people had been inside, planting evidence, shaping a narrative that would explain my suicide long before it happened. How much time did I have left? Not much. A week, maybe less. Their desperation was showing. What can I do? I asked. You can help me finish this, Chen said. Help me bring down the entire network. She walked to another table and lifted a thick binder, its pages, worn from years of use. I've been building this case for 5 years. I have names, bank records, connections, but I need one final piece to lock it all in place. What piece? I need to catch them in the act. I need them to try to kill you, and I need to be there when it happens so I can shut it down and make arrests. The thought of being bait again made my stomach clench, but the logic was undeniable. If they could be caught attempting to murder a law enforcement officer, it would be enough to bring the whole machine crashing down. What would I have to do? Keep living your normal routine. Don't let on that you know anything. When they make their move, I'll be watching. I'll have backup in place, like at the Piton property. Exactly like that. Except this time, we'll be ready. I glanced around the makeshift command post, the walls plastered with photographs, documents, maps, evidence of a conspiracy that had wrapped itself around my life. It was overwhelming, but it explained the gnawing suspicions I'd carried, the feeling of being surveilled, the downward spiral I couldn't control, the sense that reality itself was twisted. Why should I trust you? I asked. For all I know, you're part of it too. Chen didn't flinch. She seemed to expect the suspicion, because if I wanted you dead, you would be. I've had countless chances over the past 2 years. I could have ended you in a dozen ways that would have looked like nothing but bad luck. She was right, though the truth offered little comfort. And because I have this, she pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A recording played Tom Brennan's voice, sharp and unmistakable. The problem of what I buried here, and the problem of the cop who found it. You recorded that night, every second. I was nearly 200 yards away, with long-range surveillance gear. I have audio, video, all of it. Why didn't you step in sooner? Why let it get that far? Because I needed him to talk. I needed him to admit that killing you was part of something bigger. Without that, I had nothing. Her reasoning made sense, but it didn't erase the fact that she'd risked my life to bait a confession. What happens now? Now we prepare. When they come for you, we'll be ready. She handed me something small, barely larger than a hearing aid. This is a beacon and communicator. Keep it on you at all times. If you're in danger, press twice. I'll know where you are instantly. What about the sheriff? Shouldn't I tell Roberts? Absolutely not. We don't know how far this reaches. For all you know, people in your own department are compromised. That thought chilled me more than the threat itself. To think that colleagues, men and women I'd trusted with my life, might already be bought was almost too much to process. How will I know when they make their move? You'll know. They'll create a scene you can't ignore, just like at Petin. Except this time, it will be engineered to look like you killed yourself. I slipped the beacon into my pocket and studied the command center again. What if something goes wrong? What if you can't get to me? Then you'll die, and they'll get away with it, like they did with the other 15 officers. Her bluntness was brutal, but there was an honesty in it that I respected. This wasn't a drill. There were no guarantees. But that's not how it ends, she added firmly. I've been preparing for this exact moment for 5 years. I know how they operate. I know their tactics, and I know their flaws. What flaws? They're arrogant. They think their system is flawless. They believe no one can touch them. But they've gotten careless, too sure of themselves. They'll make mistakes. They'll underestimate you. They think you're just a small-town deputy who stumbled onto something he shouldn't have. They don't realize you have military training, survival skills they can't account for. She wasn't wrong. I'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before ever wearing a badge. I'd learned how to stay alive in hostile places, where every breath might be your last. And they'll underestimate me, she continued. They think the federal investigation is just routine cleanup after Brennan. They have no idea I've been on their trail for years. I wanted to believe her. But I'd seen enough to know never to underestimate an enemy who already had blood on their hands. One more thing, Chen said as I was about to leave. Don't trust anyone. Not your deputies. Not your dispatcher. Not even your neighbors. Until this ends, assume everyone is compromised. The drive back to town felt dreamlike. My eyes darted to the mirrors every few seconds, searching for headlights, shadows, any sign of a tail. But the roads were barren. Just me, the Texas night, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, people were engineering my death. When I reached home, I scanned the familiar rooms with new eyes. Strangers had been inside here, planting false evidence, building the stage for my staged suicide. The air itself felt tainted. I wanted to tear everything apart, to rip away the lies they had embedded in my life. But Chen's warning echoed. Any change in behavior could tip them off, so I forced myself into routine. I made a sandwich. I let the television run. I checked the locks. All the while, my thoughts circled back to the beacon in my pocket and the inevitable moment when I'd need it. I didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, just after midnight, the radio crackled. I was on patrol in the eastern county when Sarah, the dispatcher, came through. Unit 14. We've got a possible suicide in progress. Old water tower on County Road 1534. Caller says. Someone's on the platform with a rope. The old tower, 15 miles from town, abandoned since the 40s when the county built a new system. A rusting 100-foot skeleton with a ladder that looked ready to collapse. Kids used it to drink, and once in a while, someone used it to die. Copy. Dispatch. ATA. 20 minutes 10-4. Be advised. Caller reported the subject appears to be in a law enforcement uniform. My gut went cold. A staged suicide. Someone in uniform. Remote location. Middle of the night. It was exactly what Chen had warned me about. I pressed the device in my pocket twice. The signal was sent. Wherever Chen was, she knew. I turned onto the dirt track of County Road 1534, the truck rattling as it cut through scrubland that hadn't seen life in decades, and I knew I was driving straight into their trap. The water tower loomed against the night sky, an isolated and perfect place for something bad to happen to a deputy working alone. As I got closer, I spotted a vehicle parked at the base, a white pickup truck with no license plates. My eyes followed upward, and sure enough, there was a figure moving around on the platform at the top of the tower. From this distance I couldn't tell for certain if they were in uniform, but it looked like they were adjusting equipment or setting something up. I parked about 50 yards away and keyed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 14. I'm on scene at the water tower. Visual on a subject on the upper platform. Beginning approach. Copy, Unit 14. Dispatch replied. Do you need backup? Negative for now. I'll call it if the situation changes. I advanced on foot, one hand resting on my holster. The ladder running up the side of the tower was rusted, but still looked like it would hold. The person above was definitely wearing what appeared to be a sheriff's deputy uniform, though from the ground I couldn't make out their face. Sheriff's Department, I called. Step away from the edge and come down the ladder. Number, response. The figure didn't so much as flinch, just stood there completely still, like they were waiting for something. I started climbing, slow and careful. The rungs were slick with dew, biting cold under my gloves. The higher I went, the more the tower swayed under the night wind. As I reached the top, I finally got a clear look. It wasn't a deputy at all. It was a mannequin, dressed in a spare uniform, rigged with a noose around its neck. From a distance, it had been staged to look like a deputy preparing to jump. Scattered across the platform were papers, suicide notes written in handwriting that looked disturbingly similar to mine. My stomach dropped. This was a setup. The realization hit me just as the sound of metal screeching echoed up from below. I looked down and saw two men in dark clothing cutting through the ladder. Panic shot through my was 100 feet in the air, stranded with no way down. One of the men cupped his hands and called up, Deputy Morrison. Been waiting to meet you. I was trapped. No backup, no way off the platform, and no idea how long it would take Chen to track the signal from my device. What do you want? I shouted down. The man grinned. We want you to jump. Save us all the trouble. Not happening. That's what we figured. That's why we brought some encouragement. The second man produced a small box with an antenna, while the first busied himself with something at the tower's base. From my vantage, it looked like explosives. Here's how this goes. The leader called. In 10 minutes, this tower comes down. You'll die in the collapse, and everyone will believe you climbed up here to end it all, only to chicken out too late. Why? What the hell did I do to you? You know too much. You've seen too much. Makes our employers nervous. What? Employers? I pressed. But they ignored me, focusing instead on wiring the charges. I checked my watch. 10 minutes since I'd activated the tracker. Chen could be anywhere, but even if she was nearby, organizing a tactical response would take time. I had to stall or find another way out. The platform was maybe 8 feet square, surrounded by a waist-high railing. The mannequin stood at the center, surrounded by forged notes. Whoever had planned this had gone to great lengths to make it look authentic. I scanned for options. Old maintenance cables inside the tower, badly corroded. A small crane arm frozen in place from years of rust. Nothing useful. The men below worked methodically, not rushing. They knew I wasn't going anywhere. That's when the night erupted with the thumping roar of rotors. 2 helicopters streaked in low, spotlights blazing. The tower lit up like it was midday. Federal agents. A booming voice announced over a megaphone. Drop your weapons and move away from the charges. The 2 men froze, outnumbered and outgunned. They raised their hands and backed off. One helicopter held steady near the platform, while agents fast-roped down to secure the suspects at the base. The other hovered close enough for me to see Chen inside, dressed in tactical gear, speaking into a headset. Her voice came through a loudspeaker. "Deputy Moore, are you injured?" "I'm fine," I yelled back. "But they cut the ladder. I'm stuck. We're lowering a rescue line. Move to the edge and stand by." I edged over and waited while they lowered the rope. It took about 10 minutes to haul me off the tower, but it felt like an eternity. When I finally touched solid ground again, Chen was there waiting. "You hurt?" she asked, scanning me quickly. Double quotes, "No, just rattled." "How'd you get here so fast?" "I was already close," she said. "Been tracking chatter between their network cells for weeks. When they started lining this up, I knew it was going down. Tonight." I looked past her at the 2 men who'd just tried to orchestrate my death. They were cuffed in the back of a black federal SUV, wrists pinned tight behind them. I didn't know their faces, had never seen either man before. "Who are they?" I asked. "Contract killers," Chen answered without hesitation. "Hired guns. Same employers as the Brennans. Only these 2 are the polished version. Professionals. And now?" "Now," Chen said, "we use tonight to pull apart the rest of the network. These 2 will talk. Once they do, we'll have the leverage. We need 4 indictments across 3 states." She was right. Faced with the reality of federal charges for attempting to kill a peace officer, both men folded. They chose survival over silence. Over the next few weeks, their statements tore a hole in the network. 17 arrests followed, among them 2 county sheriffs, and even a captain in the state police. The scope of it was staggering. 420 years. This network had been quietly responsible for dozens of murders, including the 15 officers whose deaths I'd seen listed in those files. Their power rested on a mix of fear, corruption, and violence. Contract assassins, compromised, lawmen, and an endless appetite for control. Human trafficking, murder for hire, blackmail. Maria Santos, the girl whose disappearance had first drawn me close, was only one name in a ledger of forgotten victims. They found her body on a ranch 10 miles from the forest where we'd searched. She hadn't been lost at all. She'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see, and that was enough. Chen's case had ripped the mask off everything. A conspiracy that wormed its way into local police, county governments, even federal offices. But now, it was broken. The arrests shattered the chain of command. The mountain of evidence would make sure the survivors spent their remaining years behind bars. For me, there was a strange kind of clarity in it all. I finally understood the paranoia, the sense that unseen eyes were always on me. They had been by 2 sides. The network that wanted me dead, and Chen, who had kept me breathing. The endless nights of looking over my shoulder ended after with Peyton. The obsessive lock checks, the shadows that made my pulse spike, the feeling of an invisible presence, all of it faded. But some scars didn't heal. Linda and I were finished. Too much silence, too many things left unsaid. With my fellow deputies, there was a wedge, now whispers, confusion about how I'd been part of something so vast without them knowing. And me. I wasn't the same deputy anymore. Once you've seen the rot, it's hard to ever fully trust. Again. Chen offered me a position in her unit, whatever shadow outfit she worked for. More pay, more purpose, more risk. I turned her down. I'd had my fill of secret wars. I wanted small-town calls, drunks and break-ins, things that could be solved without blood and betrayal. 6 months later, I was still patrolling Archer County's back roads, still answering the same dispatch calls, but everything looked different now. I knew the shadows hid monsters. I knew corruption could crawl into any office, any badge, any title. And I knew some people would kill without hesitation to keep their secrets buried. But I also knew there were people like Chen, people who fought from the darkness, who stood between ordinary folks and the wolves circling them. The old water tower came down a month after the raid. The county called it unsafe, too unstable to leave standing. Maybe that was true. but I always figured it was just easier to demolish. A reminder of what had happened there. I still drive past the empty lots sometimes. Nothing left but cracked concrete and scattered rubble, but in my mind, I still see it lit by floodlights. Helicopters chopping overhead, death closing in, until salvation arrived, with rotor blades and rifles. That sound, the thundering beat of helicopters over the dark fields, will always be the sweetest sound I've ever heard. That night taught me something. You can feel completely abandoned in the dark, convinced no one is coming. But sometimes, there are guardians watching from just beyond sight. Guardians with badges, with jurisdiction, with the firepower to take down the demons no one else even knows exist. So I still work nights, still drive the empty highways, still scan the shadows. But I'm not afraid anymore, because I know somewhere out there, people like Chen are waiting. And sometimes, in those quiet hours, when the radio is silent and the stars are sharp above the horizon, I think about the 15 who weren't as lucky. Deputies, sheriffs, troopers who came too close, who were erased before they could speak. They died protecting people who never knew they were in danger. They died because they believed the law mattered, and when I think about them, I remember why I first pinned on a badge. Not for the paycheck, not for the authority, not even for the thrill, but because someone has to stand guard. Someone has to step into the black and face the predators that thrive there. That someone might not live to see the dawn, might be swallowed whole by something too big, too hidden, to ever fully beat. But if no one makes the attempt, then the monsters win, before the fight even starts. So I keep showing up, keep driving the lonely roads, keep watching for the cracks where evil seeps through. Because now I know the truth. Even in the deepest dark, even when you think you're alone, there's always someone out there watching, waiting, building the case. And when the hammer finally falls, when the law finally catches the men who think they're untouchable, the sound of helicopters in the night sky will always mean the same thing. Hope. I never thought I'd speak this story aloud. For 8 years, I kept it sealed away, buried so deep I sometimes pretended it hadn't happened. But the nightmares never let me forget, neither did the faces. And every time I drive the stretch of highway between Latch and Plainview, I swear, I can still smell the smoke. My name is Sheriff Tom Dalton. I've worn a badge in West Texas for 26 years. Started in Hale County straight out of college. Worked my way up the ladder, and I thought I'd seen it all. Domestic disputes ending in blood. I felt like I was finally beginning to understand that sometimes the job of protecting people means facing things that aren't supposed to exist. Things that hide in the darkness between radio calls and patrol routes. Things that kill old ladies who see too much and make good cops question their own reality. As I drove back to Wardtown, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The highway stretched empty behind me, but the feeling wouldn't leave. That knowing certainty that I wasn't alone out there. That in the silence of the night, something unseen was watching every move I made. The game had changed and now I was right, in the middle of it.